Hello and welcome to Colleague 7 Sprint Review for 18.01.02. This will cover the work undertaken between the 23rd of January to the 5th of February. Starting with the sprint goal, and for this sprint we've continued to enhance and refine the search based on client feedback, as well as work on workflow issues relating to the requirement candidate process. Looking at the high-level items and to explain further, in this sprint we've been able to resolve an issue which resulted in lookup values appearing in the search results rather than the lookup descriptions. This also extends to lookups in selection screens as well. Following the update that was made in the last sprint, we've now sorted the go back to search option when clicking on an individual record from a search result now. We've introduced an option to edit or cancel an interview, as well as introduced a new interview type field and a status field as well. We've made an update so that you can see all of the requirement candidate history text on mouse over. This is better covered in a demonstration which I'll go through shortly. The working for us alert, which appears when opening the candidate record that is in a current placement, has been updated to take into account additional criteria, and a new setting has been added to cover how this alert manages permanent placements. And as part of our ongoing project to introduce a suite of standard reports, we've now delivered a placement report, which offers an overview on all placement activity. We'll now go through a short demonstration on the key features from this sprint. Okay, so the first thing we're going to go through are the search-related enhancements or fixes that were applied as part of this sprint. To begin with, if I start by just running a quick search here, just to bring up some results, and then those will come through there. So what's to begin with, the lookup values. Was a fairly key item in this sprint was to resolve the lookup values issue that we were seeing in search results, and this goes for search results that you obviously have from running the search and also in selection screens as well. What we were seeing when I refer to lookups, that's basically drop-down fields that you have available within records. So you have an option to select a field, it drops down and it gives you multiple options within that field to select. So an example being source, status, type, those are all drop down or lookup fields. So what we were seeing within the search results options was that the lookup code would appear rather than the lookup description. So that's now been resolved so that the correct description will always appear for all lookups, and that's again across all of search and all of selection screens as well. As part of the last sprint, we implemented an update relating to using the go back to search option. So when selecting fields, you could press on view records. It would take you to the records. You'd have the option to navigate through those records, and then you'd have a go back to search option, and that's now been updated so that it takes you back to the specific search result and the exact page that you're on within the search result as well. So it's taking you directly to where you need to be. What we've done as part of this sprint is basically just do the same thing, but this is from an individual records perspective now. So against a single record, you can click on that record there, and it will take you to, in this instance, the candidates, and there'll be option to go back to the search here. So the go back to the search option will need to be pressed if I want to return back to that search result, specifically going to where I was in that search result as well. It's really important that we don't use the back button in the browser as part of doing this, because we can't then pass the necessary parameters to make sure that you go back to where you were within that search result. So if you click on this button, takes you back to the search and takes you back to the search result that you had open, so that you can continue doing what you were doing before. So that's the update that's been made there relating to this feature. There is one point of note, and that's related to an option that we applied in a previous sprint back to do with opening a search result in a new window. So if someone has set the open search results in a new window option, if that is set to yes, then the go back to search option won't work. Basically, when you click on this a candidate record or click on any individual record from within a search result, it will open up a fresh tab taking you to that record. There won't be the go back to search option. So this is obviously for use when you want to stay within a single browser window when you're using that option. So that's just something to be aware, just to make sure that you're taking advantage of that feature if you wish to use it. Anyway, that's the update that we made there relating to the search. Okay, so the next thing to cover is the new option that's been added to an interview record that allows you to either edit or cancel the interview. So what we'll do is we'll go through the process of arranging an interview here, and then we'll look at the interview record and look at the different options that you can do now. So obviously from the candidates tab of a requirement, you have your associated candidate records that have obviously been linked with the requirement. What we'll do is we'll arrange an interview. So on the interview column, we'll click on the arrow there, and now we have an interview type field that's been added as an option here. That's a lookup so that you can add to that list if you want, but the first to fourth interviews will be in there as options, plus other interview and telephone interview as well. It will default to first interview when you're loading it. If we set, let's say Friday at 3 o'clock, and then we'll save that to create the interview record. And what you'll see is obviously that against the interview column, the date of the interview is obviously now appearing against that candidate, and you also have access to the interview record via the links options here. So what we'll do is we'll open up the interview record, and what you can see is that we have added two options to the interview record: the edit interview and cancel interview. All these fields will be locked down as read only when you're accessing the interview record, and then when you click edit interview, a save and cancel button will appear, and then at that point you're able to edit this interview in terms of the detail behind it. You won't be able to update the interview status field. That's reserved for the cancel interview option, as you have essentially two options: active or cancelled, relating to the interview status. But you can obviously change the interview time, you can change the the interview date, you can change the interview time. Let's change that to there. And you can also change the contact if you wish as well. You could change it to a different contact against the company if things have changed there, and you can also enter in some interview notes into this field as well. So if we save that, obviously you could cancel that and it would revert back to the previous values, but if you save that, what it will do is it will prompt you whether or not you wish to send an interview confirmation, which is obviously giving you the option to then send an email confirming the new details of the interview confirmation, or sorry, of the interview that's been arranged. If I just go back to the obviously we've changed the interview date as well to the 11th of February, just to remember that point as well. If we go back to the requirement record here and we go to candidate, obviously you can see now against this candidate that the interview date has changed to the 11th of February. Let's go back to the interview record again, and obviously demonstrating the fact that you can edit the interview. We're now going to demonstrate that you can cancel the interview. So on clicking cancel interview, it's going to ask you whether or not you're sure you wish to do this, and we'll hit no if we want to cancel that off, and we'll hit yes if we want to make sure that or to cancel the interview essentially. Again, it's going to prompt you as to whether or not you now want to send a confirmation email. Again, that could be a template, or it's suggested that that would be a template to the candidate contact confirming that the interview has been cancelled with merge code set up as necessary. But essentially what we've done there is obviously cancel that interview so that it's no longer in play against that requirement record. So if we go back to the requirement and go to the candidates tab, you'll see now that along that line there, along that candidate record against the interview tab, obviously we're back to seeing the red arrow there to progress the workflow along, and obviously the interview icon's gone as well. Also, another thing to note is that if you cancel an interview and it was a second interview or a third interview, the date that you see within here is going to revert back to the last date of the date of the last interview. So that's just how it sort of keeps in line with the dates of the interviews, just so that it's most up-to-date interview that's been taken place. Obviously, if you want to arrange a interview, you need to tick. If you want to arrange a second interview or third interview, you need to tick the candidate, and under here hit arrange interview. That's to arrange a second or third to go over that. We are planning to introduce workflow so that from this area there'd be a drop down option where you could then select to arrange a further interview, so that that workflow is a little bit more straightforward from within this table. That will come in a future release, but for now what we've obviously implemented is the ability to edit or cancel the interview, and that's the functionality that's as part of this release. Next point to cover, and it is feeding off the back of the last demonstration that we went through regards to the editing or cancelling of an interview. What we had as a situation with regards to these records, when you click on a candidate row, it obviously drops down and then it pulls through the history that's been associated with this candidate relating to this requirement, specifically relating to this application. But what there was an issue with is that this text section here that you can see here is obviously being truncated by the size of the column. So what we've introduced is a mouse over option, so that when you mouse over that history text, you're obviously going to get the full detail of what is in that history displayed there again alongside the history row. So that helps obviously to view of the nature of what the text is containing and what it shows. So you can obviously read that and does it in a quick and easily digestible way. So that's an update that we've made to make sure that the history text is readable when looking at a requirement candidate, and that can obviously cover rejection reasons and interview updates. And obviously, I failed to mention off the back of the last demonstration that obviously when you are cancelling an interview or editing an interview, that obviously a history is being created off the back of doing that workflow, and again that just is included within this history area. Yeah, just that history text is an option that it can now be moused over and viewed, and we're looking to introduce that option to all histories throughout the system, which we'll do as part of the next sprint, but that was just something that we implemented as part of this sprint here. Next point to cover relates to the working for us check that is performed when you're opening a candidate record, and it's essentially this alert bar that you will see if the candidate is in a current placement, whether that be a rolling contract or a contract, or if indeed it's in a permanent placement. With a rolling contract and a contract, there's established start and end date or an end renewal date periods where we can incorporate obviously whether or not the record is, or whether or not the placement is current and live. With permanent placements, however, it's a little bit more difficult to do that because of the nature of a permanent placement being indefinite. So what we were seeing is there were instances where records were appearing with the alerts that were very old placements that shouldn't appear and weren't relevant against that candidate any longer. There was also a failure in terms of acknowledging permanent end dates, which we had to resolve as part of the work that we did, and also for archived records as well, this alert would still appear. So there were some updates to be done across the board relating to this functionality. But what we've now got is it working on the basis of obviously whether or not a current placement is assigned to it based on the start and end date of that current placement, whether that be rolling or contract. And if it's a permanent placement, and if there's no end date, we have also incorporated a new global setting, which is within this working for us section that we've set up, which will allow you to advise the maximum age of a permanent placement from its start date in terms of its relevance for that working for us. So if you only want to see perhaps for the next 2 years that this candidate was booked into this permanent placement, and then from then onwards they're free to then be considered again for further permanent placements, then obviously that's the setting that you would update to specify, either 2, 3, 4 years, depends on your preference. But that's the extra option that's been added as part of that option there. So that was the work that was done in this release. Okay, so the final point to cover relates to the placement report. So just as we have done in the past few sprints, almost on a per sprint basis now, we're introducing new reports into Colleague 7 with a view to obviously replacing the version 6 reports that had previously been distributed. So we've done a consultant report, a requirement activity report. The entity details report relates to the GDPR right to access for candidate and contact details. And now we have a placement activity report in there as well. And with a placement activity report, what we tried to do was essentially try and amalgamate a number of reports that have been delivered in version 6 into a single overview report within Colleague 7. So just as you can do with the other reports, you have a period option that you can specify. So you've got a date range where you could put the from and to, or you could choose to just look for all placements of this week, this month, this year. What I'll do is I'll select date range, and I'll choose a fairly wide sweeping date range in there. And then I'll select a batch of users here, and then we'll run the report. And as I say, what we've tried to do is amalgamate a number of the reports so that they essentially all can reside within this placement activity overview. So there is an overview section here that when you click on, it will give you essentially the summary activity and a list of all of the users and obviously their associated numbers within here as a simple chart overview. But if you want to start looking at the detail, if you want to look at all your current placements, then obviously you can click on the plus sign and it's going to load all of your current contract placements and essentially give you an overview of everything that's happening on that front. If you want to look at all the starters that are taking place, or the placements that are starting within the date range that you've specified, then obviously you can click on starters. Finishers, again, same principle, and these were individual reports within version 6 previously, so this is obviously now a single report where everything is amalgamated. If you want to look at just new placements that have been made, again within that date range, you'll have the option to view against that as well, and the same for pending offers and rejected offers. They all will list out as you would expect them to. So that's a base placement activity report, follows the same theme and setup as the previous reports. And as I say, we continue to introduce new reports almost on a per sprint basis, with a view to offering all of the reporting options that were available in 6 within Colleague 7. So that's the update that we made there. As always, if you have any queries or feedback, please get in touch. I'll be keen to hear from you. Also, for those using Colleague 7, feel free to submit your enhancement requests via the support team, your sales representative, or directly to me using the above email address. The next video will be the sprint plan for 18.02.01, and as always that will contain a high level overview on the items we intend to work on during this sprint. Thanks for watching.